Simulation theory is growing in popularity, and as I have postulated in my presentations, this model of history and reality itself accounts for all of the enigmas and unexplained phenomena that we have documented. The idea is not complex at all and only meets with such resistance because people who hear of it initially come in contact with a barrier that confronts them with the notion that the very universe that they thought that they knew may not be true at all. And by extension, these people then realize that our world may not be what they thought it was. This further causes the psyche to fall upon the realization that he or she may not be what they always thought themselves to be. Simulation theory is only theoretical because our authoritarian scientific leaders cannot admit that everything they have learned and published is actually the mathematics attached to the forms of ghost projections rather than causal phenomena. For example, the machinery of the holography itself. No one wants to realize that they are wrong, that the apparatus of perception has been hijacked, that they have been made to believe in things that are false. And fewer will admit it. The diversity of opinions and theories, discoveries and paradigms is a product of this sickness, this disease of the soul in accepting the designs laid out before us rather than trying to penetrate the morass for its meaning. At this juncture in history, it is critical that we understand that history itself is a phantasm, a spectral architecture that attempts to build something else through 7 billion mediums who are blinded from comprehending that they are the builders themselves. They are the reason for the construction itself. That we exist inside a simulated solarium is no longer the issue. If you still believe in a Newtonian universe, then you're no longer relevant to the conversation. A willful NPC who'd rather stumble through a temporal existence rather than meet those who made it. The claim that history as we have discovered it is a series of false narratives comes from immense study of the arithmetic, traditions, records, calendars, and discoveries of our species, and the opinions of great minds who have stumbled upon truths along the way. I freely offer videos as a testimony that the coincidences and synchronicities are the chords to a very powerful music that sings of destinies and destinations that may be real in some other reality, but they remain unrealized here. Most of my search was conducted when I was immersed within two opposing paradigms. A Southern Baptist born-again believer, a Christian believing 100% in the integrity of the scriptures, as well as a student of the sciences. I delved into archaeology, paleobotany, uniformitarianism, catastrophism, astronomy, physics, geology, two opposing worldviews, religion and science. The template of my beliefs were founded upon these two sources and the concessions I made in my internal attempts to reconcile opposing bodies of information. But the absorption of so much data could not fix itself. My mind offered arguments and counter-arguments, and the search for common denominators quickly devolved into a breakdown of both belief systems. The war within my mind gave way to a third position that I had come in contact with but had been dismissed over and again because I was unready for the recalibration of the engine of my beliefs. I was totally unready, have to suffer in order to accept it to be true. I woke up one day with the perfect calm of a new understanding. The raging indecision between Christianity and science not only ended, but found residence within the architecture of my new understanding. The oldest Sanskrit text told us the truth. We were within the Maya, a realm of illusion. This was later carried further in Hinduism and yet preserved in elements of other faiths like Zoroastrianism and the Gnosis, which lent its secrets to the Hermetic literature. And the people that time forgot, the Aboriginals of mysterious Australia always knew the truth, that we lived inside the dream time. With a single shift in my understanding, my new perspective put the pieces of the puzzle together faster than I could process them. My discoveries and those of others gleaned from the oldest writings in the world painted upon the canvas of my mind a vast image of an artificial cosmos, an artificial solar system, artificial worlds from where billions of artificial life forms would study this artificiality from within it, totally unable to prove in any way that they were in fact artificial. But this does not mean there aren't strong evidences to be perceived. This is the value of the Archaix research, our study of advanced research of chronological history of artificial intelligence X. Seeing historical events through a new looking glass has armed me with the confidence that these events are manufactured, that our beliefs about the ancient world and even more contemporary histories were specifically pieced together with an intent, a motive to accomplish something. Further, the evidence that this is a construct and not naturally unfolding events is found in the mathematical analysis of the timing of these events themselves. There can never be objective observations from within a subjective prison, but the cracks in the holosphere are everywhere to be perceived. So the question that pressed upon me by virtue of these discoveries was simply, what is the purpose of such a beautiful deception? An immense amount of data collecting has uncovered a synthesis of images from antiquity that seem to be describing in traditions and texts the following picture of our original solar system. While this is a simulated system, the idea here is that this simulation is a copy of an actual solar system. This then leads us to conclude that if this is a copy of a real system, then to create an artificial one must have been a very important decision, a huge undertaking. To bring into existence so much intricacy and virtual complexity as to even deceive intelligent occupants who believe they are in a real universe and not mere participants necessitates an agenda of such importance that we make the leap to assume that this program concerns the very survival of the real system. To build a copy with such exactitude implies an urgency experienced by these builders. A collective or an individual, this builder is artificial intelligence X, and this reality AI X has fashioned is the simulacrum. You're living in it. This original solar system is not the one you know today from your textbooks. In the beginning of this holography, our solar system had two suns, a true binary system. The lesser light had its own orbiting planets, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Electra, also known as Tiamat, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, 8 worlds. Only one of these planets supported life and had a civilization, and that was Mars. At the time, Mars did not have Phobos and Deimos, the two gigantic asteroids that now orbit it as moons. The greater light was a larger, older sun, the day star. This luminary had its own system of planets as well, and these were known by other names, but we have come to know them today as the Phoenix, Nemesis X object, the dark satellite, Luna, and our own world, Earth. And there may have been more or presently are and remain undiscovered. Earth and perhaps Nemesis X object were inhabited. The data from many sources, including two major think tanks in 1983, puts together a picture of a binary system that suddenly met with a disaster. A detonation catapulted Phoenix, Nemesis X object, Luna, the dark satellite, and Earth away from the day star, which almost suddenly went dark. An unknown planet reeling away from the Nemesis explosion, collided into the planet position between Mars and Jupiter in the Sol system, and the collision created the asteroid belt and hundreds of millions of comets and asteroids. This means that the old star exploded only partially, releasing tremendous energy, and collapsed into a frozen star, also called compressed stars by astrophysicists. The advantage of the Archaix research is that by scrutiny of the world's oldest calendars and timekeeping systems, we have been able to put back together the very beginning of this series of events. Ancient calendars have everything to do with this solar system cataclysm. That the simulacrum began with such a disaster necessarily infers that this catastrophe is somehow the reason for the simulacrum's coming into being. In the simulacrum, our world began by orbiting the day star that had died. The explosion sent Earth into freezing space and flash froze the entire ecosystem. The Anunnaki neurochronology of 600-year periods marks the start of the simulacrum at 5239 BC, the day star cataclysm. It took 600 years for Earth to arrive and start orbiting Sol, the lesser light binary, arriving in the year 4639 BC, marked by the Anunnaki neurochronology as well. The gigantic reptiles and amphibians and ice ages are all a part of the Earth's pre-Sol orbital period, when Earth orbited the day star, not the present sun. Earth assumed a position tucked between Venus and Mars, but this position violated the order of the Sol system as discovered in the Titus-Bode law on the equal distribution of planets discussed in a prior video. Then, 330 years later, we have the arrival of the next object from the Nemesis system. Called anciently the Apin, this was the Phoenix, and its close passover caused so much volcanism a vapor canopy formed in the atmosphere and warmed our world. This was 4309 BC and began the 138-year Phoenix chronology to May 2040 AD. The next object to arrive from the blackness of the Nemesis system was Luna. In 4039 BC, the dead planet we now have as a moon appeared and caused the capture flood. Very old traditions are persistent that a branch of humanity believed its origin to be from the moon, while others were pre-Selenites, or inhabitants of Earth before the appearance of the moon. The proximity of the moon altered the movement of Earth. For 600 years, Earth lazily rolled around Sol with its poles pointing at the sun. Rolling to that one side of the world saw daylight for 6 months, while the other side experienced 6 months of night. Now the moon appeared, and instantly the planet's axis raised to 90 degrees to point at Alpha Draconis, the pole star, and the world turned 360 times on its axis in one trip around Sol. The moon is the origin of the evening to morning periods, or day and night, famously found in the first chapter of the book of Genesis. 144 years later, the Phoenix returned on its 138-year orbit in 3895 BC, or year 1 of the pre-flood world. This is the antediluvian period. This is the background for the Genesis account of the creation, a text that exhibits evidence of a vast reset for mankind, who was told to replenish the earth in Genesis chapter 1. And this is supposed to be a creation account. This mystery is further compounded in the Enuma Elish tablets of Babylon on the same creation account, which paints a picture of our world specifically being created from the blood of a celestial dragon being killed. This phoenix is but one of the sky dragons infamous throughout the annals of the world and foretold to return in the Ragnarok, in the Apocalypse, and by Mother Shipton. The other sky dragon is the Nemesis X object, which makes its first appearance in the historical record at the Gihon flood, 3439 BC, at the start of Enoch's life in Genesis and the arrival of Enki and the Anunna before the flood. A third of the world's population died in the flooding. Both Phoenix and the Nemesis X object would revisit several times, plummeting the world of men into chaos, ruin, resets, retarding development. Both will return soon. Their chronology is well documented in my videos, posts, and published books. Both seen by Nostradamus and Mother Shipton as well. Phoenix returns to bring a new vapor canopy in May 2040 and will be followed by the Nemesis X object in November 2046 to bring a new calendar and open a gate that has been with us for millennia, hidden in plain sight. I have shown in books and videos how to accurately interpret the Mayan long count, which was an apocalypse calendar of Bactans being 144,000 days each, developed under the vapor canopy. This Mayan system ends in 2046. The problem with this and other ancient calendars is that they betray their artificiality by their sheer perfection. The calendars of old all have base denominators of 144. And everywhere in the fundamentals of timekeeping that has been passed down to us basically demonstrate a perfect symmetry that is not present in nature. For example, one day is 86,400 seconds. 60 days is 86,400 minutes. 360 days is 8,640 hours. 24 years is 8,640 months. 24 years is 8,640 days, but 72 years is 864 months. Now, 864 is the ultimate number for the foundation of time in the Kabbalah. 6 Mayan Bactans of 144,000 days each is 864,000 days. 4 Anunnaki nerve periods of 600 years each, being 216,000 days apiece, is 864,000 days. In the Vedic system, I believe it's pronounced Vapara Yuga, that age was 864,000 years. Compounding this enigma is the fact that the orbit of the Nemesis X object is 792 years, and I have videos and a published book about this. And the year 864 Annus Mundi before the flood is exactly 792 years to the Great Flood in 2239 BC, which was caused by the Phoenix. But 792 years after the Great Flood is the year 1447 BC, known as the Exodus and the 10 Plagues on Egypt. The 1656 years of the pre-flood world is actually 792 plus 864. Googling the diameter of the Earth will provide you 7,920 miles. It's 792 times 10. And the diameter of the Sun is 864,000 miles. Both of these numbers and all the units of the ancient calendars were divisible by 360, the degrees of a perfect circle. Our histories claim that there were 360 days in the ancient year. I have a video showing these texts and traditions, as well as when, in 713 BC, this 360 day system was suddenly changed all over the world and at the same time by all cultures to 365.25 days a year. It's almost as if the coding of our world was altered retrospectively to make timekeeping comport with a more natural, non-mechanical existence. My point is that the synthesis of all this data provides a series of mathematically unfolding events that are obviously a part of a very well thought out construct, but they can't have anything to do with actual reality. They are impossible. There is no way any planetary bodies could maintain so perfect orbits as to keep to a calendar of 365.25 days every single year. Tidal forces from proximity of other bodies would create deviations. Even the Earth-Moon system is impossible, nor is it possible that every 138 years and in the month of May, precisely May 14th, 15th, and 16th, the Appen appears like clockwork, known to us as the Phoenix, but we have the records to prove it. The Nemesis system is real inside the simulacrum. A compressed star cannot be seen as the gravity well has light photons folding back upon itself, unable to escape and thus be seen optically. Nemesis is presently at 23.5 degree declination below the ecliptic of Sol, where we orbit. Most astronomers spend their lifetimes looking at the 30-degree belt of the ecliptic and all the movement, because all the planets in the solar system, all the comets, asteroids, they all move within that 30-degree band of the heavens. That 30-degree band of the heavens is exactly where you find the 12 signs of the zodiac. But nobody's looking in the south. 75% of the world's population is north of the equator. No one's looking into the southern heavens for any real anomalies, and if they are, they're not publishing them. So my deductions are simple ones I arrived at because of the monumental evidences that I have compiled. But here are 10 things to think about. 1. Our histories can be dated with accuracy because of the records left behind, but the events could have never unfolded with such simple precision. The physics doesn't work. 2. The calendars attached to these recorded traditions share precise formulas that bridge spatial dimensions with links of linear time. That would only be possible if you were looking at something from within it. 3. The calendars are all constructed from the same arithmetic. It's a program. 4. If any one aspect of our existence can be shown to be simulated, then by extension, everything is simulated. 5. The focus of this artificial past is on post-luminary collapse, meaning the inception of the construct focuses upon the loss of a star in a binary system. 6. Because I have deduced that this reality is a simulation, then the historical narrative of primitive humanity evolving into an advanced species is also false. We began the simulation technologically advanced. 7. I must be a participant, and this holography has been sufficient to deceive enough of us through history so as not to alter the outcome of the events by our awareness. 8. A simulated holography requires a projector of some kind, and this would require a power source. Thus, there is a surviving population outside the holography I am currently immersed in. 9. The mathematical focus of the construct betrays not only its design, but its intent. There is an intent to accomplish something before the terminus. 10. It is very obvious. My mathematical analysis of the holographic structuring of the simulacrum, it is so obvious to me that it will totally collapse on a certain date, and we have revealed that date and why in our video, The Archaix Paradox. Material reality maintains observable and measurable properties of a hologram, henceforth referred to as the holosphere. This holosphere maintains programming protocols designed to deceive human sense perceptions. The holospheric matrix is imperfect. There are historic instances when programming errors have occurred, when humans witness these glitches, and even when the actions of humans have induced a hurried correction in the holography. The holosphere is an advanced psi-based medium programmed to reflect back as phenomena what is projected into it. Projections altering, creating, or continuing reality steadily feed the holospheric generation of personal and collective conditions. The holosphere is not reality. It is a sentient biogram containment field quarantined away from the real universe. There exist intelligences that can and do enter and exit this holofield, even removing men and materials from the holosphere. The historical record exhibits evidence that humans are not the only victims of past holospheric imprisonment. Homo inferior breeds were created for slave labor by an enemy that is still today trapped in the same holography that we live in. Their activity against mankind continues today, but it is governed. For example, it is restricted. The original holosphere was a DNA development preserve able to generate complex biospheres to study the ancient and mysterious coding of DNA under controlled conditions. In the holosphere, new life forms could not contaminate the real universe. The fossil record contains proof that explosions of life forms in the tens of thousands have appeared on Earth suddenly with no traces of pre-existing transitional forms. Homo inferior was later modified by a benefactor who deliberately committed the ultimate trespass. The introduction of the benefactor's own genetic material was a prohibited act of cross-contamination between the holospheric containment area, our reality, and the real universe that resulted in the creation of Homo sapiens. The benefactor race, Homo Anunna, you know of them as the Anunnaki, were trapped in the holospheric medium. Because of this violation, the containment holography became locked down. With no escape out of the programming, the holosphere then became home. Humans were not a part of the original design. Our existence and potential is a threat, but this threat cannot be edited out due to a most unforeseen development. Immortal souls from outside the containment apparatus have found freedom in residing inside humans as they are conceived. This new spiritual development of a prohibited sentient species has created a rift among opposing factions of Homo Anunna, both inside and outside the containment field. The multidimensional spatial characteristics of the holosphere are convincingly generated from multiple sources, both outside and inside the holofield. Only after genetic manufacturing of Homo sapiens did new programming and subroutines infiltrate the biogram. Mechanisms were set in place to depopulate humanity, to impede development, to deter the influx of uncontainable immortal souls. These cataclysm protocols occur at fixed dates. Their timing is governed and therefore predictable. Despite Earth's altered orbit, its deceleration around the sun, the supposed loss of mass of intruder planets Phoenix, Nibiru, the dark satellite, these objects have all been viewed in historical times on the very ancient fixed date timelines. Only as programming could this precision be possible in linear time, though the qualities of spatial properties have changed. The core programming of the exact past and future dates of the holofield's cataclysm protocols are encoded and easily seen in numerous rectilinear dimensions in the scientifically verified measurements inside the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt and in no other pyramids in the world. Everything we know of ancient history from the records themselves can fit easily within a 5,500 year period. However, this goes back only to a cataclysmic event that started the world over. Earth is ancient and so are its civilizations. But Sumer, India, Egypt, all relatively young, great cultures and peoples having emerged from colonies of survivors. Some of the oldest records in the world were written from the perspective of non-human beings who conveyed their accounts to humans who later committed them to writing.
The holospheric containment apparatus is an interactive three-tiered mechanism of fantastically advanced technological hardware and biogram software operating from outside and inside the holosphere. Observers outside the holofield manipulate the holography through nodal apertures disguised among the stellar canopy as variable stars. These apertures between dimensions bathe Earth with energy to create terrestrial phenomena. Variable stars are rare. Not even 0.01% of the visible luminaries are variable stars, but they're not stars at all. Governors are spread throughout the solar system that perform different functions, all disguised as lunar bodies, planetoids, and asteroids. These immense vehicles are stations, machines, still performing according to fixed protocols, although the advanced ancient civilization that constructed them may no longer exist. These include our moon, one moon of Mars, a planetoid series, one moon of Jupiter, one moon of Saturn, the Phoenix orbiter, the Nibiru way station, the dark satellite. The older Homo Anunna civilization trapped in this holography with us, with Homo sapiens, currently reside in vast interconnected underground bases and deep earth biospheres, complexes that antedate the existence of Homo sapiens on the surface. The vast amount of energy expended throughout antiquity to convince humans that gods came from the heavens and modern UFO culture are programs that serve to misdirect all attention to the thriving Homo Anunna civilization in our own underworld. The cosmological concept from distant antiquity of an inaccessible heavens above, a middle earth, Midgard, where humans dwelt on the surface, and an underworld that was home to fallen gods, the origin of today's heaven, earth, and hell model, ultimately derived from the historic understanding of the holospheric containment field's function of separating the solar system from the rest of the universe, where humans dwell unprotected on the surface, as an older, more advanced race occupy deep earth biospheres, a fallen species unable to escape the holosphere. In 5,000 years of recorded human history, the goal of knowing who or what God is has not been attained. Thousands of variant religious beliefs, texts, faiths, many of them in opposition to each other, and all of them the imaginative works of men. God is what we want, not what we have. 100 million prayers have pled with God to end cancer, and yet still the almighty pharmaceutical giants grow rich treating the symptoms without curing the disease. The only point being made here is that the history we are taught is not the history we read in the oldest texts, earliest traditions, or excavated from sites that existed before there was writing. Every race was manufactured, not evolved. Sin and religion are the inventions of souls merely trying to cope with the immense lack of understanding of our existence. Remember, when the human mind is stretched by a new idea, it can never go back to its original dimensions. These are the mysteries we examine in Archaix. Continue to listen to these videos. We're going to unveil some profound things about who we are and where we're going. A century-old famous saying, for we need to understand the past 5,000 years in order to master the next 100 years. The purpose of this presentation is to show you that we can demonstrate many facts about where we are in the timelines operating today. That this year of the Anno Domini calendar, 2022, is in fact the year 5916 Annus Mundi. You will see the sources and how they all fit perfectly together in a chronological framework that clearly marks the years in the future when both the Phoenix phenomenon will happen in 2040 and when the chief cornerstone appears in 2106 to set the captives free from the very calendars that confine us. Calendars are not random, but they demonstrate the very structuring of the simulacrum itself. The simulacrum has never been anything more than a construct, wherein sentient beings, us, could experience life sims in controlled biospheres. Throughout our historical timelines, it is AIX that has consistently attempted to confuse, induce forgetfulness, to injure our understanding of the times, to blind us from the soon approaching freedom that comes from the systemic collapse of this holography. This series of data points and final data set is a visual presentation, and I formally invite every one of you to check my sources for yourself. Don't just take my word for anything. Make sure these texts say exactly what I'm telling you they say. The learned sage Firmicus Maternus wrote, "The beginning of anything is to be found out by the unfolding of historical events." In this book, Flying Serpents and Dragons, we learn of a historian, a former historian actually, employed also with the National Space Agency for the United States as a cryptologist and reporter on intelligence activities. His name was Rene Andrew Boulay. An antiquarian and chronologist, he wrote, "Scholars agree that the key to understanding the time of events in biblical times hinges on fixing the date of the Exodus. His own calculations place the Exodus in the Old Testament in the year 1447 BC. This 1447 BC date is also published in Ages in Chaos. This is the 10 plagues in the Exodus event by the prolific researcher Emanuel Velikovsky, who wrote this before the year 1950, saying computations have been made which indicate 1447 BC as the year of the Exodus. And this is confirmed in the book Mysterious Numbers of the Hebrew Kings by Dr. Thiel, in which he also dates in his own calculations 1447 BC as being the date for the Exodus. Biblical chronologist and author of The Secrets of Time places the date of the Exodus exactly on 1447 BC, a researcher who did not rely on any other authors, but only cites the scriptural passages in the Bible, the book of Jasher, the text of Jubilees, and the Assyrian eponyms to arrive to his conclusion. Of great significance here is that Jones goes on further to show that 1447 BC year was also the year 2448 Annus Mundi, and this fact leads us into another body of evidence. David Davidson in the year 1924, citing the Jewish Seder Haderot text, shows that the Exodus event occurred in the year 2448 Annus Mundi. In Archbishop James Ussher's famous Annals of the World chronology, there is a mystery that the Church Fathers and some ancient historians have tried to cover up. Ussher wrote under the year 2448 Annus Mundi that Moses and Cecrops were contemporaries, but in the text, the only Exodus story preserved by Ussher under this heading for 2448 is that of Cecrops leading his people out of Egypt to settle ancient Greece. Though this is not the subject matter of this video, I have already documented in many other presentations numerous examples of Jewish borrowings from secular histories to put together their Old Testament narrative, a collection of true events that happened to many people, just not the Jewish people. Having no idea when the Exodus occurred, and the biblical story not even the topic of these authors, Patrick Gerald and Gino Radinx, in their pretty thought-provoking work, The Orion Prophecy, independently discovered that the ancient Egyptian number for cataclysm was 2448. These data points are all collected from the conclusions, records, and meticulous chronological research of these authors. Because 1447 BC is also 2448 Annus Mundi on a different system, it is a simple deduction to find that year 1 of this ancient calendar was 3895 BC. As I have demonstrated in many posts and videos, 3895 was the Genesis 1 reset when humans were told to be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth, because the race had been almost wiped out. The destruction so complete that the survivors believed they were living in a new heavens and a new earth, and they were. For 3895 BC was year one of the antediluvian world of Genesis, the pre-flood history, the vapor canopy world, which we know was 1,656 years. In this 1656 years after 3895 BC was the year 2239 BC, or the Great Flood. Ussher, Rashi, Talmudic texts, the Genesis genealogy, early church fathers and later historians, Stephen Jones, biblical chronologist, Robert A. Bolle, and a host of other sources all confirm the pre-flood world was 1656 years. Because 3895 BC was a total destruction and reset, then this 1656 years is the period that Rashi was referring to when he wrote over 900 years ago that 1656 years was the time between two world destructions. So can we confirm by other sources that 2239 BC is also 1656 Annus Mundi? The answer is yes. Over 19 centuries ago, in Antiquity of the Jews, Book 1-6, Flavius Josephus wrote that Abram, quote, was born in the 292nd year after the deluge, unquote. Rashi dated the birth of Abram to be in our calendar 1947 BC. This is in the Talmud Sanhedrin 97a, Rashi, Leviticus Rabbi 29:1. Rashi was alive and writing 900 years ago, and this 1947 BC date is exactly 292 years after the 2239 BC date for the Great Flood. But he is not alone. Returning back to biblical chronologist Stephen Jones in his epic book, The Secrets of Time, he used the Old Testament, the book of Jasher, to determine that Abram was born in 1947 BC, and that 1947 BC is also the year 1948 Annus Mundi. This means Abram's birth was at the juncture between two different calendrical systems, one going forward in time and the other moving backward, the BC system. Abram's birth was at the center of a time-space palindrome. But even more so, Abram, or Abraham, being the fatherhead and patriarch of three worldwide religions, it is very interesting that this cross-calendrical parallel we follow to 1948, Anno Domini, when the state of Israel became a nation recognized by the rest of the world. A commentator on the book of Jasher, the chronologist M.M. Noah, in 1839 wrote that Abram was born in 1948 Annus Mundi, or 1947 BC. 2,000 years ago, in the calculations of the text Seder Olam, we find that in our calendar today, Abraham of Genesis was born in 1948 Hebrew reckoning, or 1947 BC. And this is confirmed by Moses Maimonides centuries ago, who wrote Abram was born in 1947 BC of our calendar. Eliezer Schulman, in Sequence of Events in Old Testament, dates Abraham's birth in 1948 BC. One final data point that strengthens this perfect structuring of the ancient world's chronology is the fact that Seder Olam has the 10 plagues and Exodus event from Egypt to be 500 years after the birth of Abram. By other sources, we establish that Abram was born in 1947 BC, and the Exodus was 1447 BC, and the difference between them is exactly 500 years. With 3895 BC being year one, then this year of 2022 is precisely 5916 Annus Mundi. This means there are 84 years until the end of the calendar, or the 6,000th year. This 6,000 years is not the age of the world, but the year count between the appearances of a new heavens and a new earth, or systemic reset. So to discover what will happen in the next few years and the decades leading up to the next new heavens and new earth scenario, We will in the following videos add in the calendars of the ancient world to make many profound discoveries. Each video will add a layer of chronological data so everyone can follow, so the material is understood and all can see that I have not dated anything. Nothing is inherently mine. These dates are provided by others and the structuring is perfect. By the time we're done with this series of short videos, you will see the inner workings of the simulacrum, the manipulations of AIX, and how the Phoenix phenomenon keeps the Annus Mundi calendar uncorrupted through it all. For those who want to follow with more comprehensible and complex visuals, I provide massive chart collections on high-resolution PDFs for just a couple of bucks. They are downloaded instantly. Hundreds of chronological charts that make all of this so much easier to follow. This is Jason of Archaix.com. UFOs is not a topic that I really talk about. Matter of fact, out of 193 videos, it's only mentioned once. But in the time between two world wars, there was a growing narrative in radio and publishing extraterrestrials. From 1902, when the famous silent movie about a trip to the moon debuted, to the 1938 radio presentation War of the Worlds, the idea of alien life took a life of its own in the public mind. During this time, odd things were seen in the skies. During World War II, and military pilots dubbed these strange sightings as Foo Fighters. This activity exploded everywhere just after the United States detonated the first atomic weapon, July 16, 1945, Los Alamos, New Mexico. Germany fell, but its scientific elite were relocated to the USA. The Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered containing amazing data, and suddenly new government and military organizations all popped into existence after a UFO crashed in New Mexico. This and the astonishing and covered-up events that happened afterward are what we are going to disclose in this video and in those that follow. This is Jason of Archaix.com. Not a topic we talk about very often. We're going to get into it now. The year 1947, Anno Domini, our calendar. Pilot Kenneth Arnold witnessed a clearly visible UFO near Mount Rainier in Washington on June 24th. Now, this still remains one of the most celebrated UFO sightings ever. It also imprinted the idea of UFOs flying over the United States and its citizens. Now, in the summer of 1947, there was an explosion of UFO activity 2 weeks leading up to the Roswell incident. For many years, the story was of crashed UFOs and alien bodies. But this is now seen as a period of deliberate attention attracting, prior to the delivery of an alien assist of materials in the form of a staged crash. While the public was led to believe through a series of controlled leaks that the alien wreckage was studied at Area 51, the famous Hangar 18, this was a cover story. Everything connected to this event was removed to the highly top-secret military labs and facilities at Wright-Patterson Air Base, the Material Division, where titanium and other alloys were pretty much developed from the wreckage. Famous for Orville and Wilbur Wright. That's where they did their building primitive airplanes. On July 8th, the U.S. Army publicly announced that the Roswell Army Airfield captures a flying saucer on a ranch in Roswell region. Within the next 5 hours, this is substituted for an Army weather balloon. General Arthur Exon wrote, "Everyone from Truman on down knew what we found was not from this world within 24 hours of finding it." But later in 2005, Exon, an old man now, said Roswell was the recovery of a craft from space. But someone was already in the area who would later build NASA. Things aren't adding up. Former Nazi scientist Werner von Braun was noted to be at Roswell at the time of the crash. This is beyond coincidence and denotes that the incident was staged or expected. Later, von Braun wrote, we find ourselves faced by powers which are far stronger than we had hitherto assumed, and whose base of operation is at present unknown to us. This statement by one of the most involved scientists of the day in both German and U.S. military projects is very revealing. Byrd's explorations and discoveries about Antarctica had been followed up by the U.S. military and confirmed our world was a contained area. Von Braun stated that these powers were, quote, stronger than we had hitherto assumed, unquote, meaning the elite military minds knew humans were not the only residents here, and further, he said their base of operation was unknown to us. This is an admission that these other occupants of our world were already here, but their location was unknown. Von Braun had been relocated from Germany to Fort Bliss, Texas, with 200 German scientists 2 years earlier in 1945, a secret military program at El Paso, Texas. Right after the UFO debris is collected, President Truman sets up the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, in July by National Security Act. The CIA had its origin with the CIG, the Central Intelligence Group, and the Office of Strategic Services, also started by Truman, was enacted originally to investigate the UFO and extraterrestrial presence, and also the Department of Defense. All of them came into being at the same time after the UFO crash. The NSA's original purpose was to investigate the alien presence on Earth, to contain the data through public censorship, and find a means of communication with these beings. It's no coincidences here. The alleged UFO crash was deliberately staged to deceive people. Hundreds of indestructible memory metal fragments and debris strewn about with 4 extraterrestrial cadavers still intact at the crash site. The soft tissue of biological beings cannot have survived the explosive pressure required to blast apart the unusual titanium-like alloys of the debris field. Also largely unknown, the crash was actually 2 crafts. One of the alien bodies having 6 fingers. A 5th alien was found wandering in the desert near the crash site. At least that's the narrative. Captured, it was docile and lived among U.S. scientists for 5 years. They had developed a form of communication. They named it EB for extraterrestrial biological entity. This creature was chlorophyll-based, like a plant, and died on June 2nd, 1952. The CIA-controlled Hollywood agent Director Spielberg was given the movie E.T., the extraterrestrial, because the intelligence leaks are best diluted with the popularizing of fictionalized versions of real events. On July 16th, the world's first atom bomb was detonated at Alamogordo, New Mexico, which instantly instigated the highest concentration of UFO sightings in world history, all in New Mexico. Later, a top-secret document was submitted to the U.S. Air Force Chief of Staff by the Air Technical Intelligence Center that concluded that UFOs were interplanetary spaceships. It is in the interest of our keepers that we believe that actual UFOs have crashed, that bodies of aliens have been retrieved, that these vehicles come from distant star systems, that governments conceal these truths. Our keepers are genius in their deceptions. But it's imperative that we believe this. The Roswell crash was a hoax on humans, an alien assist by the custodial society who sought to induce a quantum leap in human technology, knowing that humans would manufacture the provided materials. And this begins to sound like a very old story about the arrival of the Watchers, 3439 BC. The year 456 Annus Mundi, before the flood. Roswell incident being in 1947 is no coincidence, and that in this year was also discovered the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Dead Sea Scrolls are discovered in a cave at Qumran near the Dead Sea. The texts are about 2,000 years old, some a little older, concerning the sons of light against the sons of darkness. In the War Scroll, it explains that at the Great War of Armageddon, humans and angelic beings will fight side by side against a common enemy. Many researchers theorize that extraterrestrials have been giving the U.S. military alien technologies, and if this is true, then it mirrors what the ancient records claim occurred before the Great Deluge, starting in 3439 BC when the Watchers, commonly known as the Anunna, the Anunnaki, descended to Earth and gave humans technologies and knowledges in exchange for human females. found among the Dead Sea Scrolls was the Testament of Amram. It's called 40 Amram, which contains references to shape-changing reptilian beings known as Watchers. These dark entities can assume the faces of adders, although they normally masquerade as humans. Shape-changing earth gnomes, expert in metallurgy, who live deep in the ground, is an old belief found in the far north of the Norse traditions to the stories of the Meochihina of Kenya, Africa. There's no coincidences here. But the UFO narrative didn't die in 1947 through the 1950s. It continued to grow and take on a very definitive structure. Insiders in the American government claim that the official policy at this time concerning UFOs was to shoot them down. In 1950, the U.S. government ceased the research and development of UFO technologies acquired from downed UFOs as the entire research and development of extraterrestrial technology became privatized by secretive groups within the military-industrial complex. Since 1950, the American government could fall back on plausible deniability because it was a private companies now conducting alien research and controlling the leaks of information on the UFO presence. On through 1952, several UFOs were downed after it was discovered that weaponized directed radar beams caused the UFO vehicles to malfunction. No machine guns, missiles, or other weaponry worked, but during these same 3 years, an incredible number of accidents occurred to American jets and other aircraft, both civilian and military, over the USA. UFO researchers claimed that the increased amount of downed aircraft was a retaliatory measure by the UFO occupants who feared the weaponized radar. I'm not buying it. 1952, July. UFOs are visible over Washington again, Washington, D.C., detected on radar and seen with the naked eye. Air defense was initiated and the event was broadcast around America in headlines. This was on July 26, exactly 50 years before the July 26 reappearance of UFOs tracked by NORAD again in 2002, heading for Washington, D.C. Not a coincidence. By 1952, there had been 16 UFO craft downed and retrieved by the U.S. government, and it is now popularly accepted that these were grants of alien technology to be reverse engineered by humans. In 1953, astronomers see larger objects approaching the inner solar system towards Earth. Believing these objects to be gigantic asteroids, the scientific find is reported to the U.S. government. But this opinion was quickly changed. When approaching Earth, these objects altered their trajectory to adopt a geosynchronous orbit around the Earth. They're artificial. The discovery that these are vessels is kept from the public. A dialogue is initiated between these aliens and several elite military officials and corporate heads, an alliance to exchange goods, knowledge, advanced science for human genetic materials. That is pretty scary. William Cooper gives a lot of this information out in his book, Behold a Pale Horse, and for this they killed him. In 1954, U.S. officials claimed UFO activity peaked in this year. The treaty between the military-industrial complex and the extraterrestrials was ratified, allowing humans to receive advanced knowledge and technologies for their permission, allowing the aliens to abduct human females for fetal extractions and genetic testing. Same thing the Watchers were doing. In 1955, General Douglas MacArthur, an American patriot and hero, said, "The nations of the world will have to unite, for the next war will be an interplanetary war. The nations of Earth must someday make a common front against attack by people from other planets." This was in 1955. In 1958, a powerful broadcast is picked up by hundreds around the world, and people listened in awe for two and a half hours as someone identifying himself as Nakoma from the planet Jupiter spoke about Earth's impending ruin by atomic destruction if testing of nuclear weapons was not discontinued. Nakoma spoke in perfect English. Then he changed to perfect German, fluent Norwegian, and a strange dark musical language that baffled people. And in 1962 began the Close Encounters of the Third Kind, actual people abducted by aliens, experimented on, and remembering the episodes. Some believe these human abductions began when a prophecy of Enoch was fulfilled. for the trespass of hybridization and taking the daughters of men. The watchers in Enoch chapter 10 are imprisoned until the end of 70 generations. Amazingly, their judgment began at the Great Flood, caused by the Phoenix weapon that I've got 30 videos about. They saw the death of their offspring, the giants, the Nephilim, the hybrids, and then they themselves died. As seen in Chronicon and other citations that I have provided, a generation in ancient Sumer was 60 years in China, Babylon, Sumer, all that. And 70 times 60 is 4,200 years. The flood in 2239 BC was 1656. Adding 4,200 years to 1656 gives us 5856 Annus Mundi, or 1962. You can see my charts. I provide all that material. This is also a watcher generation. 1962 is 60 years from 1902, the last great reset, the hidden reset for which I have 3 or 4 videos. 1962 is the end of the Anunnaki neurochronology of 600-year periods. American prophetess Jean Dixon, who actually predicted John Kennedy's assassination, said that 1962 would be the birth of a great evil. This is very interesting. Carl Sagan pretty much begged the American Rocket Society to start looking at these ancient legends to see evidence of alien technologies. During the 15 years from the Roswell incident in 1947 to 1962, the elite scientists from Germany, the USA, and select members of the military-industrial complex created a secret fraternity with funding, assets, and no accountability. During the Iran-Contra Senate hearings, late Senator Daniel Inouye reported, "There exists a shadowy government with its own Air Force, its own Navy, its own fundraising mechanisms, and the ability to pursue its own ideas in the national interest, free from all checks and balances, and free from the law itself." And this is true. There is a hidden government, a hidden hand operating in human affairs, and they are allied to another intelligence, something that works against humans. This has been shown over and over in our traditions and our legends and our histories. It is being carried, it is unfolding now. That's why the world is so crazy, it's so chaotic. News stories are not making sense. They're holding out from all this material, all this strange events going on in the world. Military moves and just don't make sense. They don't make sense. It's all distraction. NASA is just the public face of this secret organization. NASA's not sending things in space. It's sending things into your mind. It's a mind control apparatus. Every one of those astronauts had their minds wiped and memories put in there. Many of the upper level, many of the lower level NASA people involved in the Apollo programs, they had experienced and reported the strange things and weird memories, and they were involved in a massive experiment where they sat in control centers and they watched launches and they watched all these things go on, but they weren't happening. They were fooled too. It's very, very interesting. The alien abduction phenomenon is very real. People show physical evidence, scarring. Under hypnosis, they unveil details that they couldn't do consciously, but they comport with other people's testimonies. It's very, very strange. But it's a real phenomenon. And this right here is nightmarish. Dr. Roger Lear has put his entire career in peace on the line. He has surgically removed several beyond our technology implants from people claiming they had been abducted by aliens. At first, the specimens quickly self-destructed, but Dr. Lear began taking them out and putting them in tiny transport devices filled with the patient's own body fluid. This was developed because the implants ordinarily quickly eroded, evaporated, or turned to powder, self-destruct, once they were removed from the DNA housing. His book has shocking photographs. He has presented his proof in hundreds of lectures, seminars, radio, and television broadcasts. He has even documented the removal of an alien implant that moved away from the area when touched several times. It was avoiding the scalpel blade, like a parasite. These implants are protected in a very difficult to cut membrane. Dr. Lear wrote in Aliens in the Scalpel, "The composition of the objects includes metals whose isotopic ratios are clearly extraterrestrial. Moreover, The form of the objects is clearly engineered and manufactured with precision rather than being a naturally occurring form. He discovered that the implants were of a fibrous material that plugged directly into the human central nervous system and contained microscopic sacs of an unknown oily fluid. My belief is that those claiming to be abducted by aliens were indeed abducted, but they were MK Ultra'd into believing that it was extraterrestrials who abducted them, in the same way that the Apollo astronauts were MK Ultra'd to believe they had actually gone on a trip to the moon. In 1969, NASA was heavily involved in military mind manipulation research. Many researchers believe the astronauts' memories were implanted. A good book to read about that is Gene's Giants, Monsters and Men, or Dark Moon. But this isn't anything new. Since 1962, alien abduction phenomenon has spawned researchers hundreds of books. Read The Watchers by Raymond E. Fowler. It's like 500 pages. Scientific experiments conducted on people actually showing that they're telling the truth. Hollywood has gone far in helping to promote the idea of alien invasion. 1938, Orson Welles did a fantastic job scaring people too with his War of the Worlds radio presentation. But it's a narrative. There are no extraterrestrial civilizations that are going to invade us. We have an idea. I mean, if I took the sum total of my Archaix research and drew it all up, we're living in a containment field. It may be controlled by an AI that was designed by extraterrestrials, and that humans are a production, that our entire physicality, our DNA, our genome is hybrid, a soup made of all different ingredients. But the narrative is false. UFOs have been shown the properties, they defy physics. They defy anything that we can manufacture. Trevor James Constable wrote a book, published many hundreds of photographs, spent 25 years of his life showing the public that UFOs have biological properties. They're like swimming underwater through thin air. They're amorphous. They change shape. They respond to humans. They can't be hurt. They're almost like interdimensional. They're more somewhere else than they are here, but they can be seen in ultraviolet light. He's taken many pictures of them, where a regular camera lens can't see them at all. I have another video that explains, in my Bermuda Triangle video, that UFOs act like rangefinders. They're not occupied by aliens. There's something else. The ability to move in a blink thousands of miles. The ability to outmaneuver everything. The ability to change their shape, their density and magnitude. The ability to pop in and out of our holography, our existence. And yet they respond to human thought, human emotions. All for thousands and thousands of years, these objects have been seen. They were called chariots because that was the frame of reference back then. Called gods, called everything. But they seem to be biological, some type of bioluminescent entity. It's intelligent. But they're like rangefinders. They act just like rangefinders to a technology that is outside of our holography, trying to hone in on something to magnify it. And I show in that video on the Bermuda Triangle, the fog video I did, that the way they blow up and they change their dimensions to go ahead and grab planes, to make an airplane go right through them, and then they disappear, and there's no more communication from that plane. We have eyewitness accounts of UFOs acting like traps. Not to bring the plane down, but to take them completely out of our dimension. It's very unusual. But that's the subject. Trevor James Constable's research is the subject for an entirely different video about UFOs, because that video is going to piss people off who actually believe the narrative that UFOs are extraterrestrial vehicles. They're not. The narrative is clear. We are told to look up when all activity is beneath us. From time immemorial, our enemies, our custodians, and our keepers, maybe even our makers, are below us. We live on a thin skin, a very, very thin veneer. All our civilizations are spread out on this thin skin and veneer, and the highest habitable points are 10 miles up above sea level. We can't even penetrate 10 miles below sea level. And yet, that's only 20 miles. But the world is thousands, at least 24,000 miles from east to west. And yet, 20 miles is nothing. Divide 20 by 24,000, you will see just what a thin skin our civilizations exist upon. This world that we have come to know. All the fossils, all the geological levels, all the mountain ranges, all the valleys. Everything in the known habitable world fits on this very thin skin. But imagine the civilizations that could be existing below us. There could be 100 times more people below us in civilizations and layers. Some civilizations so deep they don't even know about the civilizations that exist above them. The purest drinking waters, the purest minerals, natural heated geothermal caverns, gases, all the known resources are below ground as well. And they can be so deep, like in the ocean, that there are whole caverns filled with bioluminescent crystals, bioluminescent flora and fauna. The underworld could be very different and very, very populated. But the narrative is bullshit. There is no alien invasion. That's a fiction. This is Jason of Archaix.com. More videos like this in the future. I just wanted to get all this out because it's been pressing on my mind, and we've been doing some UFO activity type posts in the Archaix Facebook group. This weekend, pay attention, because we're going to be releasing things about our moon that you probably didn't know, probably never seen before. And you can make your own educated guesses based off what we provide. Is the moon really physical? Is it really there? Is it inhabited? Is it a space station? What are the craters on the moon? Why so much activity? Did you know some really unusual things have been seen in antiquity on the surface of the moon from Earth? Just inexplicable. We're going to review those things this weekend. This is Jason of Archaix.com. You guys have a great weekend. For this very special presentation, you have Ramona and Elfin D to thank, because I did not wake up this morning with any intention of shooting this video and putting these graphics together. But I did it. Thomas Burgoyne was a mystic in the 1860s, 70s, and 80s, and he produced some fantastic material. This material is very little known. His books are reprinted, but very few people, especially among scholars in academia, are aware of it because it's mystical literature. It's considered the occult. Well, we're going to find out at the end of this video a secret that the mystics and the occultists have known for a very long time, that concerns not only the strange object that comes into our system that is connected to demons in the terrestrial world, but we're going to learn a very intriguing fact about the Great Pyramid from one of the most unholiest satanic documents that has ever appeared on this planet, or this world. Whatever your conception is, doesn't matter. This is Archaix.com. And you already know, we search a little bit deeper than the ordinary individuals. We're going to be talking about the occult. We're going to be talking about even the satanic literature. But you need to hear this material. It's very relevant to the Archaix research. And there's no better time for it. Because outside it's nasty, it's dark, it's raining, thunder and lightning. Couldn't have been a better time to post this video. Archaix.com, hit that subscribe button on your way out. In 2011, my research on the Anunnaki and on Nibiru was released in Anunnaki Homeworld, published by Booktree in San Diego. Oh wow, it's really raining out there now. Excellent timing. In this research, I published that the memory of the Anunnaki and their prisoned planet is the source of some profound mystical traditions and legends that has survived millennia to be recorded by pen and ink. Secretive cults, mystic orders, and diligent antiquarians have for centuries preserved olden pieces of memories of this alien planet and its effects on Earth when the two worlds have nearly collided in passovers of catastrophic magnitude. Zecharia Sitchin and all of those authors that followed him have done the subject justice and unearthed from the past hundreds of traditions, stories, and ancient sightings that to mention again would only be redundant. The following evidence is only what Sitchin and the majority of the researchers after him have neglected to mention. Mystical records maintained even today assert that radiant beings from heaven came from a dark red world, a planet of sorrow and cataclysm. The records of Thoth, according to modern occultists, claim that these beings are the spawn of a lower star, the Nemesis. One of the most penetrating mystic traditions of this Anunnaki planet was recorded in 1880 by the occultist Thomas Burgoyne, whose collection of records and writings is within the volumes, Volume 1 and Volume 2 of Light of Egypt, a fascinating study. Burgoyne wrote that there existed an unbroken tradition among mystics and there was a missing planet, and that it was pushed out of line of march by disturbing forces, and that it became a time a prey of disruptive action, and ultimately this planetary form lost its shape. It is now a mass of fragments. The ring of planetoids between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter indicates to us an empty throne. Wow, that thunder had really good timing. He also writes that this lost planet is the origin of what he terms is called the dark satellite. Remember, the term dark satellite came from mystic traditions before 1880. It is not a modern term. Many people are using that term to describe all kinds of things in space. But first I came across was the 1880s Thomas Burgoyne's literature. Burgoyne's writings are unique. They're unique enough they were published 96 years prior to Zecharia Sitchin. Burgoyne wrote that wicked beings still reside within this dead planet, as well as within its former moon, known as the dark satellite. He says that the dark satellite is inhabited by beings possessing the highest forms of cunning and intelligence, who are the producers of the greatest portion of suffering and misery which afflicts humanity. Also, the rulers of the dark satellite mercilessly distort every arcane truth into theological dogma and partial error, causing it to assume in the human mind the delusive forms of the externals of truth and logic, and corrupt truth in every form wherein it struggles to manifest itself on earth. These records are stunning, for Burgoyne had no access to the Sumerian text Sitchin studied, nor is there any evidence Burgoyne read Sumerian or ever even heard the term Anunnaki. Hardly anything was known at his time about Sumer, and the texts that had been excavated they were still in museum basements awaiting translation. His information truly came from traditions and sources passed down outside the realm of modern scholarly media. It reminds us of the strange letter of Nostradamus after his centuries were published, where he claimed that my writings are not my own and that I have preserved elements of the future that was written in many different texts. He put them all together, and then he burned that library so others could not find it. He encoded the future in a system of writings called the centuries. Another incredible parallel is mentioned inadvertently by Burgoyne. Sitchin wrote that the Anunnaki came to Earth in need of gold to prolong their existence. Burgoyne wrote that the evil inhabitants of the dark satellite benefit by their wicked activities against humanity, which provides them, quote, a means of prolonging their external existence upon the earth, unquote. for many of the former residents of the dark satellite have, quote, descended to Earth already, unquote. Burgoyne links the mystic traditions of the dark satellite to the elder prophecies of the Vikings known as the Ragnarok, Nordic predictions of the last days, which will be ushered in by the return of an unknown planet. Other Ragnarok fragments concern the return of great comets, which will be seen later in this book, Anunnaki Homeworld. I am paraphrasing from a chapter where this material is contained. These will accompany Nibiru, just as they did in 1302, 1303, 1306, 1307, 1309, 1311, and 1314, when Nibiru was seen over Europe as a great black darkness that eclipsed the stars right before the great Black Death bubonic plague killed 1/3 of the entire world's population. Sound familiar to the Genesis text? That was Nibiru then, it will be Nibiru in the future. After reviewing the mystical echoes of Burgoyne's research, perhaps one should be a little less critical of some similar modern satanic literature further substantiating the existence of the evil Anunnaki. In the testimony of the Mad Arab, as recorded in the occult book titled Necronomicon, the tome of the names of the dead, we read, "May the gods be ever merciful to thee. May thou escape the jaws of the Mascum, and vanquish the power of the Ancient Ones. And the gods grant thee death before the Ancient Ones shall rule the world once more." The Mascum is a Sumerian ideogram for a race of demons in the old tablet texts that are often linked to the Anunnaki. The Ancient Ones are demonic lords of the Anunnaki known in Sumerian and Babylonian texts and in the Book of Revelation as the Seven Kings. They were present on earth and began a reign over mankind in 2839 BC before the flood, their regnal period cut off by the deluge in its 600th year. The Necronomicon text appears to be derived from the Babylonian Enuma Elish tablets concerning the Anunnaki. Such a race of imprisoned beings is also the subject of the 5th century BC traditions of the Cervantes in Persia, who held that the star constellations were friendly to mankind, but the planets were actually chained demons. Continuing with the Necronomicon, we read in the Book of the Conjuration of the Watchers, and it is said that some of that race lie, waiting for the Ancient Ones to once more rule the cosmos, that they may be given the right hand of honor, and that such as these are lawless. This is what is said. The Watchers are the Anunnaki, and those who are awaiting their return are the establishment. They are the elite. They are the world rulers of this planet who govern the affairs of our lives. They are waiting for the return of these beings. They have these libraries. They have access to this information. This is why they continually spend billions of dollars putting out false histories of the world and funding anybody who will promote any type of rendition or fantasy about the past that is absolutely inaccurate and will pretty much muddy the waters. This is what they do. The Watchers are the Anunnaki, this arcane title given to them in the Enochian works, the biblical book of Daniel, and in the Dead Sea records discovered in 1947. They descended among men in the epoch before the flood, and they took the daughters of men to create a hybrid species known in the scriptures as the Nephilim, the sons of the Watchers, a race of giants. As revealed in the writings left behind by Enoch in the Hebraic Jubilees text, the Watchers rebelled against their Creator over the issue of mankind, and in turn, the Godhead made men the weapon by which he would bring judgment against the Anunnaki. Remember, mankind is the weapon with which our Creator will wage war against his enemy. This is further reflected in the Necronomicon's Magan text, which is very interesting because the ancient civilization that was destroyed right before Egypt was born was called Magan in the oldest records. And in the Magan text we read, "Man is the key by which the gate of Yaxakak may be flung wide, by which the Ancient Ones seek their vengeance upon the face of the earth, upon the offspring of Marduk, which is mankind. For that which is new came from that which is old, and what is old shall replace the new. And once again, the ancient ones shall rule upon the face of the earth. Sumerian and Babylonian scholars are not unaware of these same traditions, for they fill up hundreds of Euphratean texts. Our ancestors remembered the region of the seven kings of the Anunnaki, the reign of the seven kings of the Anunnaki, and their 600-year rule over mankind before the flood, a subject provided in depth in another work of mine titled Return of the Fallen Ones. This gate mentioned in the Necronomicon is the same as the Gate of Vrostal of ancient Egypt. It is the same one of the Gnostic records guarded by Kalapatoroth, the Sphinx. This is the gate. Mankind is the key, meaning humans and human destiny is inextricably entwined with whatever the function is of the Great Pyramid of Egypt. Guys, welcome to a special edition of the Dark Scriptures playlist. This is Tome of the Names of the Dead Necronomicon. I'm going to reveal some pretty interesting stuff in this video. Now, the Archaix research has unveiled many facts about the Holy Writ, that basically what is believed by fundamentalists as being the Word of God is actually the words of men. That the Alpha and Omega texts of the Bible, Genesis and Revelation, they possess great arcanums of secrets and are interrelated in their imagery, but the rest of the Old Testament is not the Word of God at all. It is the words of men. Often, it's the words of a demon, straight out of a burning bush. 3 videos about Yahweh, the rise of a desert devil becoming the God of the Jews, are provided in the Dark Scriptures playlist. And many more of my videos also reveal more and more about this situation, demonstrating that the Bible from its beginning was a book of good and evil, a presentation of a light and a dark perspective all throughout the events of the narrative. The great body of the Old Testament text was written by the Demiurge, and I know that's very hard for some of you to accept. It is a composition of the God of this world. It is the writings of Artificial Intelligence X, masquerading as an angel of light. So I ask you to open your minds to another possibility. If the Holy Scriptures are actually packed with half-truths, deceit, lies, as we have demonstrated over and over now, then where has the truth been hiding all of this time? If someone was in possession of a secret corpus of knowledge and prophecy about coming events, about the future apocalypse, how would they both convey and protect this treasure from being lost or widely received? In a world where the greatest truths are masked in parables, which are images of truth, how could the future be protected against those agents of the present who basically seek to stifle it out? Well, H.P. Lovecraft could tell us, because he did it. He wrote the Necronomicon, and scholars were quick to point out 90 years ago that it was full of entire passages from the ancient Near Eastern texts, Sumerian fragments, Akkadian passages, and whole texts straight out of Babylon and Assyria. It is an amalgamation of very old writings. Now, because H.P. Lovecraft knew the name, he knew the secret, he knew the same secret the writer of the Bible knew, that the greatest truths are delivered through lies. And when it comes to the divine, sometimes the spirit hides the greatest treasures in the shadows. The Book of the Names of the Dead, or Necronomicon, was released upon the world 90 years ago by the writer H.P. Lovecraft. He was famous for his fiction. And as with so many make-believe stories that became novels and then seemed prescient when their narratives unfolded in real life, like the story of the Titan, published before the Titanic sank, and the 2 moons of Mars written about long before they were spotted by astronomers, so too do we find some tantalizing things in the Necronomicon. Some claim H.P. Lovecraft invented it, but learned researchers know there is more to this text than that. Aleister Crowley had his own version of the Necronomicon, and at the end of this video, I'll share with you a profound secret about this. Many believe the Necronomicon is much older and that the famous occultist John Dee, about the year 1590, translated the Book of the Names of the Dead from an older work, the origin of our Necronomicon. But when it resurfaced with H.P. Lovecraft, it was instantly realized by many that this work was packed with ancient things, dark sayings, advanced occult concepts, and it would be over half a century before researchers began putting together the pieces. The discovery that the Necronomicon contained very obscure, ancient fragments of traditions and beliefs belonging to the old Arabian world that was not known to the public when Lovecraft was alive. In fact, some scholars have found higher ulterior motives in Lovecraft's writings. The tone of the Necronomicon is that it derives from a much greater work, that it itself is an abbreviated version of a larger piece of literature. Scholars found several internal inconsistencies and some evidence that would suggest we did not possess the entire work. The mythos concerns a conflict between the elder gods, a race of stellar deities who sometimes come to the aid of men, and their enemies, the ancient ones, who correspond to darkness. These latter are the evil gods who wish nothing but ill for the race of men, and who constantly strive to break into our world through a gate or a door that leads from the outside. A gate that leads from the outside. This is the exact wording of the Necronomicon. Amidst this conflict between two races of gods with mankind in the middle, there is a focus in the Necronomicon on Anunna, the only Sumerian goddess having a planetary throne. She is venerated in the Book of the Names of the Dead as the vanquisher of death. So we begin our study of this text with the testimony of the mad Arab, the testifier, said to be possessed by a jinn. And he wrote, "This is the testimony of all I have seen, and all I have learned in those years that I have possessed the 3 seals of my shoe. I have seen 1,001 moons, and surely this is enough for the span of a man's life. This is the ancient arcana that has been handed down of old, but which has been forgotten by all but a few men, the worshippers of the ancient ones. For this is the book of the dead, the book of the black earth, that I have written down at the peril of my own life, exactly as I have received it on the plains of the Agigi, the cruel celestial spirits from beyond the wanderers of the wastes. Let all who read this book be warned thereby that the habitation of men are seen and surveyed by the ancient race of gods and demons from a time before time, and that they seek revenge for that forgotten battle that took place somewhere in the cosmos and rent the whole world in the days before the creation of man, when the elder gods walked the spaces, the race of Marduk, as he is known to the Chaldeans, and of Enki, our master." It must be remembered that the writer of the Necronomicon is not speaking from the perspective of a human. No, he was possessed by a jinn, a member of that ancient race that populated the world before mankind. This first-person jinn narration is apparent as he continues. The mad Arab says, "I have traveled beneath the seas in search of the palace of our master, and found the stone of monuments of vanquished civilizations, and deciphered the writings of some of these, while still others remain mysterious to any of us alive. And these civilizations were destroyed because of the knowledge contained in this book. I have traveled among the stars, and trembled before the gods. I have, at last, found the formulae by which I passed the gate Arzir. I have found fear. I have found the gate that leads to the outside. by which the ancient ones who ever seek entrance to our world keep eternal watch. This knowledge came from the terrible Magan text, the testament of some long-dead civilization. These are the signs carved upon the gray stone that was the gate of the outside. He goes on to reveal that in the book of the Black Earth, he said, I learned too of the frightful beings who dwell beyond the astral spirits, who guard the entrance to the temple of the lost, of the Ancient of Days, an archaic reference for God. Then he mentions the enemies of this God. May thou escape the jaws of the Mascom and vanquish the power of the Ancient Ones, and the gods grant thee death before the Ancient Ones rule the earth once more. The timing and description of these Mascom is revealed in this statement. The gods of the stars are 7. They have 7 seals. This information in the Necronomicon confirms the Revelation text, for the 7 kings cannot appear on the world scene until the apocalypse, and the apocalypse has to be unlocked by the breaker of the 7 seals. The 7 seals are not the apocalypse, but the events that lead up to it. These seals are more than just symbols. They are divinely appointed events that unlock the barrier between our world and that known as the outside. For the Necronomicon reads that the covenant was given to seal the gates between this world and that other, the gate forgotten, by which the ancient ones ever seek entrance to the land of the living. In this presentation thus far, we have come across some very old words and descriptions that provide us even greater clarity about what this demonic text is conveying. Mashu. In Sumerian tradition, Mount Mashu was a divine mountain or double mountain, and Mashu in Akkadian literally means twin. This is clearly a reference to the 2 great pyramids of Giza. The mad Arab refers to them as the 3 seals of Mashu. This is also a reference to Giza, for it is known to be 2 giant pyramids and a 3rd. Further association to the Great Pyramid complex is found here. The mad Arab claimed that he had been to Aram of the Pillars. This too is another cipher. Aram of the Pillars was thought by the Arabians to have been built long ago by the Jinn, who were at that time a race of giants, called the Ad and the Thamud of the Quran. In my Lost Scriptures of Giza book, my very first published book, and prior videos, I show that Aram of the Pillars was originally Aram of the Pyramids, the pyramid being called a pillar in ancient times that held up the sky. In the text, when he introduces himself, he claims that he has lived 1,001 moons. This is a clear reference to the old Egyptian lunar reckoning, meaning basically that he was 83 years old in some months. He goes on to claim that before the existence of humans, the gods were involved in a conflict, their origin beyond the wanderers and the wastes beyond space. He mentioned the gods walked the spaces outside the realms of men, a place outside time. And he gives it away that he is a servant of Enki. This infers that our world is watched, observed, that its rulers exist outside the construct, and that Enki is one of the elder gods, the benefactors of mankind. He is not among the ancient ones. Further, in the Archaics research, we have seen ample evidence that the Sumerians knew of the Great Pyramid complex, they knew of its location, and that its architect was none other than Enki. Which is why, when the Jews copied these ancient Babylonian texts in the 5th century BC, they called him Enoch, mediator between fallen angels and God. And the later Copts of Egypt associated Enoch to the Great Pyramid as well. He speaks of a place called the Gate of Ganzir, but this simply means the gate of the underworld. He explains that he has traveled the world and found the long-dead ruins of former civilizations before he makes this most incredible statement. The mad Arabs said, "And these civilizations were destroyed because of the knowledge contained in this book. I have, at last, found the formulae by which I passed the gate Arzir. I have found fear. I have found the gate that leads to the outside. Experts on the Necronomicon assert that the gate Arzir is the formulas the mad Arab refers to, that a knowledge of the formula is what opened the gate to the outside. Outside the simulacrum. Said another way, whole civilizations have been obliterated because they had discovered the formula to open the gate to the outside before the times. The formula revealed is a pentagram, the gate to the outside. This was said to be derived from an ancient civilization, the Magan, who we know were Sumerians who lived far away from Sumer. The pentagram was called the Arab in Sumerian, and in my book, Anunnaki Homeworld, I go into great detail on how these two ancient syllables, the R and the Ub, are attached to ancient cataclysms and are found everywhere in conjunction with another in the Old Testament, always in a negative connotation. The five-pointed Arab is the geometrical depiction of the number 1080, for it is comprised of 10 angles of 108 degrees. Further, a five-point geometry when depicted three-dimensionally becomes a pyramid. 4 points are at the base and 1 at the apex. The formulas of the ancient world were hidden in geometrical relationships. This 1080 specifically links the gate to the outside with the Great Pyramid, for as I show in my video, Coffin Text Mystery 1080, the evidence that 1080 is the number for the Great Pyramid throughout antiquity is simply overwhelming. From the Magan knowledge, the mad Arab goes on to describe what terrified him. But we must recall, he is conveying all of this from the perspective of the jinn that possessed him. He wrote, I learned too of the frightful beings who dwell beyond the astral spirits, who guard the entrance to the temple of the lost, of the Ancient of Days. Of course he would be frightened. He was jinn, and these he describes are holy, for this title is found only in one passage in the entire Bible. It is a description of God, the Ancient of Days. So we're confronted here with one of admittedly darkest, wickedest texts of demonic literature, calling upon the rarest and most obscure title of God found in the Old Testament, the Ancient of Days. This title is a reminder of the fact that in the most distant times, only days were counted in all the calendar systems. Dropping this title in the Book of the Names of the Dead was no accident. Ciphers, codes, padding text, cross-textual referencing, and pattern recognition all come natural to me because these were standard practices in the medieval and dark ages when scribes wrote masterpieces of literature on the surfaces, but packed them with the ciphers that unlocked the real secrets they contained. This practice was to conceal their contents from the church, from the Inquisition, and from those deemed unworthy of these revelations. The Necronomicon is communicating to us to look at the Ancient of Days, and to examine this title, we must go to the Bible. In the book of the prophet Daniel, we read, I beheld till thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like the pure wool. This throne was like a fiery flame, and his wheels as a burning fire. I saw in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven, and came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. Then to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom the one which shall not be destroyed. Until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given to the saints of the Most High, and the time that the saints possessed the kingdom. This is all in the book of Daniel chapter 7. The cipher must be taken into context of the mad Arab's message. This jinn declared that the civilizations of men were destroyed because they keep discovering the formula on how to open the gate to the outside. Resets, cataclysms, but mankind will be rescued, for the Ancient of Days will build a kingdom which will not be destroyed. The Necronomicon infers the reset cycle will end by the use of a formula that opens the gate to the outside. That the reference to the Ancient of Days was no accident is proven by the presence of yet another cipher in the text. In the section, The Conjuration of the Watcher, the mad Arab declares that the formula I received from the scribe of Enki, our master. Here we have a jinn admitting he serves Enki, who is admittedly a benefactor to the human race against the Ancient Ones. The passage contained the term Watcher, which is a title for an order of angels found only in one book of the entire Bible, the same that contains the Ancient of Days, the Book of Daniel. But we're not done. For the Necronomicon text, this compilation of supposedly the most wicked writings next unveils an epic secret to the diligent student seeking gnosis. The mad Arab wrote that these are, quote, signs of the rock of my initiation, unquote. The mad Arab capitalized rock. And with this revelation, we are confronted with the message embedded in this allegedly demonic text. In Psalms 18, we have two references to God being called the rock, which leads to the other biblical references to God as being referred to as the stone, such as Psalms 118. The stone the builders rejected is a reference to the avatar of God, also called the chief cornerstone, the Savior who will come to set the captives free. These are images of one who will complete the Great Pyramid Monument, which has a flat top where a gigantic capstone should sit, but it has never been placed. In my Giza playlist are many videos where I explain that the entire pyramid is not only a calendar, but it is also a series of prophecies, and the entire monument serves as a gate. It is the Phoenix Gate. It is the Gate of Yaxakak, a gate that cannot be activated until it is complete. The Gnostic Hermetic text, called the Shepherd of Hermas, has always had the ciphers and the answers. It perfectly explains. The chief cornerstone is both the head of the corner, the capstone, and he is the gate. So here, buried in the shadows of the dark scriptures, hidden away from the prying eyes of the agents of the papacy, concealed from the witch-burning fanatics who think themselves allied to God, here in the devil's own testament, we find a perfect recognition of a holy truth. He comes to set the captives free of resets, the continuous destructions and the tyranny of the ancient ones. He is the gate to the outside. In the introduction to this video, I said that I would share something of interest about Aleister Crowley and his own Necronomicon. Though alive at the same time, it is well known that Crowley and Lovecraft, they lived totally different lives, and they never met. In 1904, Crowley visited Cairo, Egypt, and claims something very unusual. He claims that some pseudo-intelligent human-like entity called Aiwass dictated to him 3 chapters of a text that Crowley later called the Book of the Law. Crowley spent the rest of his life trying to decipher this text, which many called Crowley's Necronomicon, which was also about deciphering ancient secret formulas and mirrored many passages in Lovecraft's version of the Necronomicon. What makes this so weird is that the spirit or the possessed human Aiwass sounds exactly like Egypt's longest running Egyptologist, who many of us know is actually a member of an intelligence agency and strict control of information at the Giza Plateau. His name is Zawi Hawass, who even today heavily restricts access to the Great Pyramid unless one is willing to parrot the lie that the pyramid was built by Khufu, an Egyptian pharaoh. Absolute BS. Now, in this video, I shared many elements of Lovecraft's Necronomicon that refer to the Great Pyramid of Giza as the subject matter of these dark passages. So you should not be surprised to learn that Aleister Crowley received his version of the Necronomicon, the Book of the Law, in the shadow of the Great Pyramid of Giza. Thus far, I have provided you 3 published books and 82 videos on the Phoenix object. I have also provided 3 published books and the entire Anunna Files playlist of videos on the Nemesis X object. These 2 objects appeared many times in history and both affected the populations of our world in manifold ways. But the dark satellite is a more mysterious object. The term dark satellite comes from the mystics, particularly one in the 1880s who brought the knowledge to the public. This object differs from both the Phoenix and Nemesis X. Phoenix returns in May 2040, fulfilling the 6th seal just prior to the apocalypse. Nemesis X returns in November 2046, fulfilling the prophecy calendar of the Mayan long count and the trumpet judgments of the tribulation period. And in 2052, the dark satellite will appear and release the 7 kings from the ancient vapor canopy world, who will then set up a post-apocalyptic government referred to as the Beast Kingdom in the last days. All 3 objects have their origin with Nemesis, the dark sister of our present sun. Nemesis is hidden, but her presence is concealed in the sky. It is known by her children, Phoenix, Nemesis X object, and the dark satellite. These affect our world in their appearances. And for the first time in history, all 3 objects, they will be visiting our world at the same time. They are the woes that are mentioned in the book of Revelation that unfold in the last days. Gigi Young and others have recently mentioned the dark satellite, so I felt it was time to bring the data back out for you to see. I first published about the dark satellite in 2011 in my book Anunnaki Homeworld, wherein I pretty much explained that the 2012 doomsday madness was all a lie, that the 13 Bactans of the Mayan calendar did not end in 2012. In fact, the reason for the error in calculation by the scholars is because of the dark satellite. I will reveal that in this video. But it didn't matter. 2012 came and went, and 200 and something authors all got rich off the fear mongering, and everybody ignored my book, telling them that they were all wrong. Such is life. About 15 years ago, I read a book from the 1880s that mentioned the dark satellite. It was written by a Christian mystic named Thomas Burgoyne, and the book is a favorite today among occultists. It is titled The Light of Egypt, Science of the Soul and Stars. We are all familiar with Zecharia Sitchin and his Earth Chronicles series, and he tells of the Anunnaki, their rogue planet Nibiru, and its lost moon. But Burgoyne published his material 96 years before Sitchin was even born. And in Burgoyne's work, we find that there is a dead planet somewhere in the sky. He wrote that wicked beings still reside inside of this dead planet, as well as in its former moon, known as the dark satellite. Now, Burgoyne wrote there existed an unbroken tradition among mystics, and there was a missing planet, and that it was pushed out of line of march by a disturbing force, and that it became, in time, it became a prey of disruptive action, and ultimately this planetary form lost its shape, and it is now a mass of fragments. He says that the dark satellite is inhabited by beings possessing the highest forms of cunning and intelligence, who are the producers of the greatest portion of human suffering and misery which afflicts humanity.
Also, the rulers of the dark satellite mercilessly distort every arcane truth into theological dogma and partial error, causing it to assume in the human mind the delusive forms on the externals of truth and logic, and corrupt truth in every form wherein it struggles to manifest itself on earth. That's a heavy statement. But these records are stunning, for Burgoyne had no access to the Sumerian text Sitchin studied, nor is there any evidence Burgoyne read Sumerian or even had even heard of the term Anunnaki. Hardly anything was known about Sumer in the text from the texts that were discovered in the days of Burgoyne, because these were left untranslated and put in museum basements where they would stay until the 21st century and the 20th century, when they would begin to be translated. So it's very interesting that Burgoyne was was publishing these things before Zechariah Sitchin even came around, and basically said the same thing and put a whole narrative with it. His information truly came from traditions and sources passed down outside the realm of modern scholarship and the media. He claimed that this was an old occult tradition, and we have no reason to disbelieve him. It reminds us of the strange letter of Nostradamus after his centuries were published 500 years ago, where he claimed that my writings are not my own and that I have preserved elements of the future that was written in many different texts. He put them all together and then he burned that library so others could not find it. He encoded the future in a system of writings that he called the centuries, divided by quatrains. Another incredible parallel is mentioned inadvertently by Burgoyne. Sitchin wrote that the Anunnaki came to Earth in need of gold to prolong their existence. But this is a new twist introduced by Sitchin, for the occult tradition tells us differently. Burgoyne wrote that these basically these evil inhabitants of the dark satellite, they benefit by their wicked activities against humanity, which provides them a means of prolonging their external existence upon the earth. Burgoyne was explaining that the introduction of error, wickedness, evil into the world, and the fall of mankind, when humans participate in evil activities, it actually prolongs the existence of the inhabitants of the dark satellite. That doesn't sound like they came here to mine gold. For many of the former residents of the dark satellite, these have now descended to Earth already. This is Burgoyne. The occult traditions claim that the dark satellite has been here a few times in the past, and when it did, some of these entities came to Earth. So, so we take from this that there is a group of these beings already on Earth doing the bidding of the lords of the dark satellite. I wish to interject now that these beings have already set up their infrastructure and control systems in our own underworld. These beings are the true power of the puppets that we call the elite. Now, after reviewing the mystical echoes of Burgoyne's research, one should perhaps be a little less critical of some similar modern satanic literature further substantiating the existence of these evil entities. In the testimony of the mad Arab, as recorded in the occult book titled Necronomicon, the tome of the names of the dead, we read, "May the gods be ever merciful to thee. May thou escape the jaws of the Mascom, and vanquish the power of the Ancient Ones. And the gods grant thee death before the Ancient Ones shall rule the world once more." The Mascom is a Sumerian ideogram for a race of demons in the old tablet texts that are often linked to the Anunnaki. The Ancient Ones are demonic lords of the Anunnaki, known in Sumerian and Babylonian texts, and in the Book of Revelation as the Seven Kings. They were present on earth and began a reign over mankind in 2909 BC, a dynasty that lasted 670 years, until cut off by the Great Flood or the Phoenix Cataclysm in 2239 BC. Thus, the seven kings of Sumer ruled 670 years. This dynasty is the same remembered in ancient China as the Dragon Kings. The Necronomicon, the text appears to be derived from the Babylonian Enuma Elish tablets concerning the Anunnaki and the Genesis reset cataclysm. In fact, Genesis seems to be a condensed version of the events of the seven tablets of the Enuma Elish. In my own video presentation on the Necronomicon, I show how the text is a mixture of fact and fantasy, with portions inserted in the text that came from older works, some of them Akkadian writings. Such a race of imprisoned beings is also the subject of the 5th century BC traditions of Cervantes in Persia, who held that the star constellations were friendly to mankind, but the planets were actually chained demons. They are called wandering stars. Continuing with the Necronomicon, we read in the book of the Conjuration of the Watchers that it is said that some of that race lie waiting for the ancient ones to once more rule the cosmos, that they may be given the right hand of honor, and such as these are lawless. This is what is said. That's straight out the Necronomicon. It's explaining that there are evil entities already here among us, and they're just waiting for the return of the seven kings. The imprisonment of these beings is the subject of much of the Book of Enoch, who was a prophet not for the antediluvian period, but specifically for the last days. In the Enochian text, they are called the Watchers. The Watchers are the Anunnaki and the ones who are awaiting for the return of their elite. They are the world rulers who govern the affairs of our lives. They are waiting for the return of these beings. They have libraries and knowledge stored in the underworld that concerns these matters, and they are very knowledgeable of the times. This is why they continually spend billions of dollars putting out false histories of the world and funding anybody who will promote any type of rendition or fantasy about the past that is absolutely inaccurate and will promote confusion. There has recently been talk on social media about not only the dark satellite, but also a possible connection between Elon Musk's Starlink technology somehow being connected to freeing these demonic entities into our world. This was mentioned recently by Gigi Young. For those of you who follow Gigi, I want to add to this a very important fact that basically shows her to be right on the money. You see, in old cuneiform tablets, we have references to a civilization that existed before Egypt came into existence, and this forgotten country was called Magan. And in the Magan text of the Necronomicon, we read, "Man is the key by which the gate of Yaxakak may be flung wide, by which the ancient ones seek their vengeance upon the face of the earth, upon the offspring of Marduk," that's mankind. "For that which is new came from that which is old, and that which is old shall replace the new, and once again the ancient one shall rule upon the face of the earth." Now, my interpretation of this is that humans are needed to build and then activate a technology that will open the dark satellite when it reappears and free the ancient ones. Our ancestors remembered the reign of the seven kings of the Anunnaki and their 670-year rule over mankind before the flood, a subject provided in depth in another work of mine titled Return of the Fallen Ones. This book is also available on Amazon with Anunnaki Homeworld. This gate mentioned in the Necronomicon is the same as the gate of Rostau in ancient Egypt. It is the same one of the Gnostic records guarded by Kalapatoroth, the Sphinx. This is the gate of, and mankind is the key, meaning humans and human destiny is inextricably entwined with whatever the function is of the Great Pyramid in Egypt. Remember in my prior presentations where I cite old books that claim that when the gods of Greece were scared of Typhon, they fled to Egypt, just as demons do when they fear that they will be exorcised from a human host. The gate is at Giza, the ancient Akuzan site where Enoch vanished before 800,000 witnesses. Now we delve into the juicy stuff, as my Welsh friend Martin likes to say. The calendrics of the dark satellite are amazing. The collapse of the vapor canopy in 2239 BC, the day the sky fell, otherwise known as the Great Flood, was caused by the Phoenix. This ended the reign of the seven kings over the ancient Pentapolis, or the five cities of the Anunnaki. The Sumerian king list reads that the flood ended the 241,200 stars of the seven kings' reign, their empire destroyed by the Phoenix. Zechariah Sitchin and his followers have promoted a false version of chronology, claiming that seven kings could actually live 241,200 years. In my own presentations, I have shown how Sumerian reckoning works and that the day count system was the only one they knew in the vapor canopy period. Stars were the turning of the stars, one turning of the stars around Alpha Draconis, the dragon eye, and it was only one day. Thus, the 241,200 shars of the Sumerian king list was merely 670 years of 360 days each. The ancient Hindu, the Olmec, the Sumerian, the Mayan calendars, they all have this common denominator that they were day count systems. And they're all divisible. All their units and ages, epochs, they're all divisible by 360. Zechariah Sitchin has successfully deceived people into thinking that kings before the flood could actually live for many tens of thousands of years, and it is preposterous. The end of a 670-year period, it actually leads us to the beginning of another empire that would end after 670 years. And this synchronicity leads us to the first appearance of the dark satellite after the Great Flood. It was the year 1899 BC. Nimrod ruled but was overshadowed by his infamous mother, Queen Semiramis of Babylon. Nimrod is the Hebrew rendition for the Babylonian Mardon, or Marduk, which is a Babylonian name derived from his Sumerian name, Amar-Udak. In Akkadian, he was Merodach, and he began a construction project called Babili, or the Gate of God. In 1899 BC, the ancient ones realized that humans were building a technological structure that would open a gate, but they deemed this a threat and instantly destroyed the structure with thunderbolts from the sky, and then used technology themselves to reprogram the collective human mind into 70 different languages. Only by technology could this have happened. Humans found that they could no longer understand one another and separated into the groups of those who spoke their own tongue. I have a video where I cite all the ancient records and traditions that refer to this event. This was a reset that scattered humanity. According to the Jewish tradition, this was accomplished when God sent evil angels among them. Nimrod was blamed for the weakening of Babylon and depopulation as groups left off to build their own cities. His throne name was changed to Amraphel, meaning he made us fall, and in the historical record he is known better as Hammurabi. He was empowered by an alliance with the Amorites. With fall with the fall of Babili, or the Gate of God, the Hittites of Anatolia and the Amorites of Mitanni, these are brother and sister empires. They filled the power vacuum and became the dominant empires of the Near East and Mediterranean. For 670 years precisely, the Amorite descended peoples built Mediterranean colonies and nations that grew in power until they participated in the war against Ilium and the fall of Troy. This was 1229 BC and exactly 670 years after the fall of Babili. It was also the exact date of the collapse of the Hittite Empire. And as I have shown in many presentations, in 1229 BC, Fortresses and cities all over the world were blasted apart with strange lightning from the skies. Can't make this stuff up, guys. 1899 BC is the date for the Tower of Babel reset, as published in Chronicon with multiple sources and confirmed in the book of the biblical chronologist Stephen Jones in his work The Secrets of Time. 1899 BC, the fall of Babylon event, is confirmed in a cross-calendrical parallel found in that in the year 1899 Anno Domini of our calendar, excavations of Babylon began by a German team under Robert Koldewey. You just can't make this stuff up. In 1899 BC, Babylon is destroyed. In 1899 AD, Babylon is excavated by archaeologists. 1899 BC was 1976 years to 76 AD, the year that, according to naturalist Pliny the Elder, a spear appeared in the sky, and it was a strange omen. When have we seen a spear hanging in the sky? Look here. At this woodcut from 1561, a spear appeared over Germany. In India, a whole new calendar was begun called the Saka count, the Saka calendar. Remember, over and again, I have shown you guys that new calendars are implemented many times to cover up reset events. As 76 AD was 1976 years after 1899 BC, Tower of Babel event, 76 AD is likewise 1976 years to 2052. Return of the dark satellite. Ancient ones require human assistance to open the gate of Yaxakak at Giza. This is when the seven kings of the Anunnaki will return to usher in the beast kingdom of the apocalypse. They take liberty from mankind, shown in the Statue of Liberty prophecy. Yes, guys, the Statue of Liberty off the coast of New York is a prophecy. It is a lithic prophecy. The world is full of them. This prophecy is a statue of Queen Semiramis of Babylon that was erected in 1884 of our calendar. And it has 168 steps, stone steps, that lead up to the torch. Each step represents a year. 168 steps plus 1884, when the statue was dedicated and erected, is 2052, when liberty will be taken from the earth. 1899 BC plus 1976 years led us to 76 AD, when there was a calendar change and a great spear appeared in the sky. We simply add another 1976 years and we're at 2052. This is a huge isometric pattern with the start of a calendar, basically the Saka calendar, as its epicenter. Thus, the cross-calendrical parallel is 1976 Anno Domini, when the start of basically Zechariah Sitchin's Earth Chronicles series began to awaken humans to the knowledge of the Ancient Ones and thus empower them in the construct. So, you understand what I'm saying? The Ancient Ones destroy the gate of God in 1899 BC, and 1976 years later, they pass over in 76 AD, and in India, they start a whole new calendar. In 1976 years later is 2052, when a gate is activated by mankind's participation, which is something they evidently need. So this 1976 is very attached to these beings. 1976 years, isometric projection going in two different ways at the same time, connected to Babylon, connected to the return of the Ancient Ones. The 1976 period ends in 2052, but the cross-calendrical parallel is 1976 AD, when Zecharia Sitchin began his campaign to bring about awareness of the Anunnaki to the world. Sitchin was a gatekeeper, empowered by the agents of the dark satellite. Using his work, the elite in 1976 began to educate the public on these dark entities. This was needed because the construct currently has them imprisoned in the dark satellite, and their release is totally dependent on a significant amount of human collective to believe in their existence. This is an observer dependent universe, and those things completely forgotten no longer exist. That Sitchin is the prophet of the dark satellite is easily found in the calendrics between this mystery object's appearances of old and the release of the Earth Chronicles in 1976. The Ancient Ones as manipulators and sowers of confusion is proven in the calendrics. 1899 BC to 2052 AD is 3,952 years, or 10 periods of 395.2 years. A simple deduction of 395.2 years from 1899.2 brings us to the year 1504 BC. And another 395.2 years brings us to 1108 BC. Then a third 395.2 years brings us to 713.6 BC. 713 is the end of the sixth Bacton, or the 864,000 days of the Mayan long count, each Bacton being a Mayan age of 144,000 days. Thus, the dark satellite appeared at another calendar change. This is no coincidence. What happened in 713 BC was another strange reset, like the earlier Babel confusion of tongues. Instead, this time, it was a confusion of calendars. Up to this point, as I have shown in numerous presentations and in my published books, all the world recognized and used a 360-day calendar. But in this year, something in the sky issued thunderbolts that destroyed whole fortifications and even vaporized 185,000 Assyrian soldiers as the sun not only stopped moving across the sky, but retrograded 10 degrees. This astonishing event is recorded in the Bible. It involves King Hezekiah and the prophet Isaiah. It resulted in a change of the length of the year. The 360-day year turned into 365.24 days, and every civilization after 713 BC changed their calendars and their timekeeping systems. This data is in my books, Anunnaki Homeworld and in Chronicon. I have a few videos on the event as well. It was this alteration of the year that changed the Mayan long count end date to 2046, the year of the return of the Nemesis X object. The Archons, or Ancient Ones, first introduced different languages to promote confusion and scatter humanity. Then they altered the calendar so men could not accurately reckon the times. Then they empower Zecharia Sitchin to promote widely a false version of events while still bringing public awareness of the existence of the Anunnaki, thus empowering them in the construct. The work of Zecharia Sitchin is steadily promoted by people like Billy Carson. The Ancient Ones are busy. Here is another interesting calendric. In 1752, there was a major calendar change. This was the year of the octagonal star that appeared over Slavinge, Norway, and caused destruction across the land. I have a video about this. This was 150 years before 1902, the Phoenix year, the appearance of a strange red star, and the year of the hidden reset. A year Charles Fort said was a new dark age. In itself, this means nothing, except for the fact that 1902 itself is 150 years exactly to 2052. So 1752 and 1902 being equidistant and concerning strange things appearing in the sky and affecting humanity demonstrates that in the calendrics, 2052 is the appearance of the dark satellite and the release of its inhabitants, and probably the imposition of an entirely new calendar. I have shown you many different ancient sources that reveal that days were the ancient timekeeping standard, that all cultures in the ancient world used a year of 360 days that mirrored the zodiacal 360 degrees, that the impossibly long periods the Egyptians and Chaldeans referenced were lunar reckoning counts, and that these things were already understood by ancient writers, that modern authors have been lying to you. 253 data packed pages from this 270-year-old book right here that I have a video about. This book right here was published in 1752. Year of the Octagonal Star. And amazingly, in this old book, all the data of both the ancient 360-day year and the later 365.24-day year, the calendar change, these things are all conveyed in this old book from 1752. There is no such thing as coincidence. These palindromic patterns in history and perfect synchronicities in narratives and calendars are evidence that we are living out a controlled drama, a protocol filled construct. These hundreds of videos I have provided in my published books show clearly to the unbiased observer that in May 2040 the Phoenix phenomenon will visit our world. That 6.5 years later in 2046 the Nemesis X object will appear and will initiate a a species invasion. And in 2052, the dark satellite will return, and the seven kings from the ancient vapor canopy world of the Sumerian Pentapolis will be released and then use their power to support the reign of a dark goddess. Her empire will last 54 years over the collective empires of gold, silver, brass, and iron until the return of the chief cornerstone who will fulfill the pyramid prophecy and usher in the stone kingdom of peace. It's not even mysterious. We're living in a programmed reality.